So without any further ado, I'm going to let you know who our esteemed speakers are this afternoon. I'm going to introduce them as there's quite a lot of us so that we can get on to the meat of the discussion. So we have got with us from the Centre of Real World Learning at the University of Winchester, Professor Bill Lucas and Dr. Ellen Spencer. It's wonderful to have you here. They're giving us a wave. We have Professor Louise Stoll, who is a professor of professional learning at UCL Centre for Education, IOE, and an international consultant who's done lots of work in this area of leadership. From the creativity, I feel a bit like I'm on Eurovision now, it's quite exciting. From creativity, culture and education, we have Fisher-Naylor, the current director, as well as Nia Richards, who's the programme manager and soon to be taking over as the director when retires at the end of the month, and also Katy Milne, who is the programme manager there. And finally, from Arts Council Wales, we're joined by Sian James, who's the programme manager for a national creative learning programme, which is currently in its 8th year. So a very warm welcome to our panel of esteemed colleagues. So huge congratulations to you all on the launch of your new book, Creative Thinking in Schools, a Leadership Playbook. It's a practical and interactive guide that draws together understanding about school leadership with a deep experience of cultivating creative thinking in all aspects of school life. So right through from the classroom through to the way we work with the adults and really promoting creative learning habits in the classroom. So I was delighted to review the book and have early sight of it. And I think it is so exciting when so much of the focus on leadership in the sector is on the very managerial aspects of running schools, the kind of technical aspects, and very much following the course of a particular pedagogy, a particular approach to curriculum, and a particular approach to leadership and management, which really is premised on the view that we know what works and that we've got the answers. And one of the major issues I think we have in the sector is that loss of agency, not necessarily autonomy, but agency within the classroom and within schools to be focused on what students in that particular context need and want, and to be engaging with our professional agency across the piece about what learning looks like, what learning could look like, and therefore what classrooms need to look like, and how do we as leaders in the system enable that type of learning to be explored and developed. So a very, very welcome book, a playbook. We're going to hear a bit more about why a playbook in a little bit. So we're going to get going hearing from the authors. A bit of Zoom etiquette. Please do keep yourself on silent so that we can all hopefully hear each other well. We have got the chat function open and we really welcome thoughts, reflections, and indeed questions. And I will do my best to moderate those questions. And whoever's not speaking from our esteemed panel will have a go at putting answers in the chat as we go along as well. So please do feel free to share your thoughts with us. So I'm going to start off with Bill. Tell me a bit, Bill, tell us all, Bill, a bit about how this playbook came about and what brought you as a group of colleagues together to do this piece of work.
Thank you, Liz, and thank you, colleagues, for giving up your time now on such an extraordinary, beautiful day. Two things, I think, drove us to this collaboration. The first is a global thing, and it will not pass your notice, that wherever you look across the world, creative thinking and creativity is in the ascendancy. We're realizing at long last, and I say we, I mean the World Economic Forum, the OECD, UNESCO, the Centre for Curriculum Redesign, and so on, we're realizing that along with other foundational literacies, creativity and creative thinking are equally important, not more important, but equally important. And that imperative is taking a while to find its way into the staff rooms and classrooms of too many schools, for all of the reasons, in a sense, that Liz was implying just now. We know from work that Brookings Institution has done that it appears creativity appears in the curricula, the national or state curricula of more than 20 countries and states, and that's growing. I know from work that I did for the Global Institute of Creative Thinking that we're getting more confident about the importance of creativity. We're getting more confident about how we can mesh it into the curriculum. We're beginning to learn about pedagogies that are most helpful, but still on that list of things that we might do as school leaders when it comes to evidencing progress, assessment, if you like, and professional learning and leadership learning. We know that we've got quite a long way to go. So that's the global reason we see a gap, and we see that what unites us across the world is an interest in creativity and creative thinking, and that's our contribution to it. At the more local, national level, this coalition, this collaboration has emerged over many years. It's been my privilege with Ellen to work with creativity, culture and education way back when Creative Partnerships was alive and well here in England. And they commissioned Ellen and Guy Claxton and myself to look at the literature and to create a model of creativity specifically designed for schools, and then to take it out onto 2 rounds of field trials, which we did, and to think about how you might evidence it. And that moment, that designing of a model, 5 dimensions, 5 habits to that model, those 5 habits, many of you will know: inquisitive, being persistent, being collaborative, being disciplined. That's to say, a reminder that we can learn how to do this more skillfully, and imaginative. That model has now found favor in more than 30 countries across the world. You'll hear a little bit later on about the great work that CCE has been doing to bring that about. And then along the way, Louise Stoll and I began to work at the leadership level, trying to figure out really what the right word to use, or words to use, was about this. Some fascinating work in Gloucestershire and Bath and elsewhere, working with school leaders, and about the same time too, lots of collaboration through an OECD research project with colleagues in Wales. In Wales, the Lead Creative Schools project has led the way, in my view, in the 4 home nations in embedding creativity in schools. So that's a long answer to your short focused question, Liz. And one more thing to say: they're really good fun and playful to work with too, which makes it a pleasure.
Brilliant. Thank you, Bill. I think that sense of space for playfulness and creativity in ourselves as leaders is so critical. It runs through the work that you've done. And how can we find that for ourselves in order to enable that for the organisations that we run and work with? So absolutely, thank you. So I'm going to come on to Ellen, and really curious about how you came to kind of understand the sorts of activities that were most helpful for leaders to really do this work and embed creativity within their schools.
Thanks, Liz. So looking at the role of leaders in developing creative thinking is really important if these creative habits that Bill's just been mentioning are to become embedded in schools. So we looked carefully at literature from across the world, and this informed some detailed questions for a set of school leaders that we found who were able to talk about the good practice already in place in their schools. So from this research, a set of key areas for creative leaders to take into action emerged, and the playbook itself is centered around these areas. Now, we call these key areas plays, and you'll hear more about why we use that word in a moment from Nia. So one play involves thinking about the change process that you have to go through as a school. Another is about developing leaders who share your values. Another focuses on culture or structures, and there are several others. So that's how we came to understand the kinds of activities most helpful for embedding creativity. But whether you're a leader or a student or a teacher, unless you have that accessible understanding of creativity, it's very hard to get off the starting blocks. Now, as Bill says, we have this validated model of creative thinking with its 5 habits. And so in the book, we weave the creative habits from that model into the plays, these key areas for leadership activity. And one thing that we really hope leaders will find helpful as they think about each play, they're considering how to bring the creative habits into school in that particular key area, but they're also considering how to develop their own creative habits so that they can model the 5 creative habits to others in the school and create a culture in which creativity is going to flourish. So if, for example, we're thinking about the play that we've called Changing Culture, for example, one activity in the book will invite leaders to look at a range of their own school's communications material and spot where the creative habits language is already being used in their school and where it's missing. Now, that might be reports, reporting on pupil progress, it might be newsletters or website texts. So in that way, they're thinking about how they can bring the creative habits into their communications. But that particular activity then will also give leaders the chance to be inquisitive, which is one of the 5 creative thinking habits that Bill mentioned. So they'll be digging into and challenging the subtle messages in their school about what matters. And they're practicing thinking more creatively themselves to get into the mindset of identifying with those teachers in the classroom and the pupils in the classroom, who this will ultimately benefit. And of course, then they're also in a position to be able to model that kind of thinking. So that is how we've combined the existing very well validated model for creative thinking with this new idea of the kinds of activities that leaders need to focus on to embed creativity across the schools.
Brilliant, thank you, Ellen. It's so exciting, I think, when we think about curriculum pedagogy change, to be attentive to the systemic thinking, and that's what this really speaks to me, is how can we expect leaders to be innovating in the classroom, supporting teachers to innovate in the classroom, when they themselves often are the most constrained people in the system, because they're the ones at the front of accountability pressures and so on. So how can we, this is the tool to help leaders connect with that and find some greater freedom and some greater space to think differently about aspects of their practice, and therefore enable and empower teachers and leaders in their school to do the same. So hooray, here starts the revolution, people. You heard it here first. So I'm now delighted to come across to Nia and Louise. Talk a bit about, it's called a playbook, and sometimes I think that language can have quite pejorative language. You sort of think about the Trumpian playbook, or it's sort of, so why a playbook, why that format, and what does that really mean? What does that mean for you in terms of how you put this together? So I think I'm coming to Nia.
Yeah, thanks, Liz, and hi everybody, good afternoon. I have to say, this was one of my most favourite conversations we had as authors when we were developing this playbook, the back and forth about what we actually call it. We did explore different ideas, like toolkit, and that was the initial idea, that it would be something to help, like you say, that busy leader who doesn't have much capacity, or with some ideas of how to do this, how to lead creative thinking at school. So toolkit was one idea, field guide was another, and neither of those really felt sat very comfortably with us, because at the same time we wanted to help the busy leader. We also didn't want this to just be a pickup and a kind of how-to. There needed to be some element of interaction with it, some element of experimentation, go away and try something, come back, think about how you might do it better next time, or what have you learned from that? What have you observed? What have you heard as part of the conversation? As you've heard from Ellen and Bill, this book, the playbook, is very much grounded in real serious thinking, serious research, but there are elements of playfulness, experimentation with it. And when we came to thinking about the playbook and actually going back to its original meaning as a sporting analogy, and where you've got coaches helping a team to get better, and being there, as Ellen said, modeling the approach, not doing it for people, but being that guide on the side, then it kind of became clear to us that actually that idea of playbook was the way that we needed to go. And surrounding all this kind of playfulness and reflection and everything else within it is it's very much surrounded with learning. And so there's a clear expectation throughout the book that this is about the learning journey and navigating that learning journey. And so it helps the leader's capacity to lead the learning of others too. So throughout the book, there are deliberate signals for the user to reflect on their interactions in the book. So like I say, trying something out. And we actually put in there that the hope is that in the future, that when they come back to revisiting some of these activities in the book, that people start to, the user starts to develop confidence in being able to adapt it, being able to personalize some of these activities and make it completely their own. And part of that learning journey too, I should mention, is we encourage a kind of doing a journal throughout, so keeping a journal. And there's an early activity about that in the book where it asks the user to reflect on their learning and to do that at different stages as they navigate through the book. And also the key thing here too is really emphasizing that they must make that learning visible to others. So again, going back to that idea of modeling that approach and how to actually practically do that. So taking all of this on board, we agreed that Playbook was for this idea, this concept, the right approach for us. In terms of creating content and so on, and the actual activities, I'll talk about that in a moment, but I'll pass you over to Louise for now.
Yeah, thanks, Nia. Yeah, it was really interesting for us as we were thinking about this as a playbook, and really how could we get powerful professional learning and really Ellen's already mentioned the modeling aspect, and we'll come back to that in terms of the leadership. And I think the first thing that we thought about was that it was really important to focus on facilitation and to treat everybody who picks this up as the leader who is facilitating the learning of others. And so part of that is also in the way that we write it, our voice as we write. We're not saying split the group into threes or ask them to brainstorm associations. We just say work in threes. So we're talking to you, you're the facilitator, you're the leader, and we're trusting that you will be able to be confident enough to turn our requests into activities. As Nia said, very much this is sort of using the sporting analogy and coaches. We were trying to think really hard about how we could help people and to facilitate their own and their colleagues' learning. And their own learning, as Ellen has said, and perhaps Nia, you could just put up that slide. So one of the things that we're doing here is, this is what Ellen was talking to you before, right in the middle, you'll see an activity. There are 5 creative habits of mind, and each has 3 sub-habits. And this activity in the middle, so at the beginning of every activity you'll see this, and this activity in the middle, we felt from our own perspective that the activity might help develop their creative habit of being all of the 5 habits of mind. In the top one, you'll see that some of them are faded, and that's because we don't think, from our perspective, that it will develop all of the creative habits. But on the other hand, you might, and we encourage you to talk about that. Thanks, Nia. We also really try and give you a whole range of stimuli, different stimuli, tools. We think that if the professional learning isn't engaging, it's not likely to move people on. So there's a lot of different kinds of tools and a lot of different kinds of activities. But at the heart of a lot of them are learning conversations, and we're really trying to get people to articulate what they're doing, why they're doing, to think deeply, to challenge their assumptions, and so on. It was interesting, as Bill said, as a team, we had lots of fun. I mean, learning conversations are much better when you have diverse perspectives, and we're a very diverse team, and that was really great.
And I'll pick up on there from just talking to you a bit more about the content and how it's structured. So the book is split into 3 parts. There's the warming up section, which is really particularly for those who are just starting out or want to revisit perhaps some thinking around creativity and why creativity is important, purpose of school and so on. And then part 2 is really going into much more of the detail through a series of plays and activities, really thinking about curriculum, pedagogy, assessment, whilst really also addressing the needs and considering the conditions, I suppose, that need to be put in place to support this as a whole school, at a whole school level or whole system level. So I'll talk to you a bit more about one of the activities, as we've talked so much about them. I'll bring one of them up for you now. Bear with me. My PowerPoint this afternoon is being very, very slow. It's coming. Here we go. Let's go. There we go. Activity 18. So debunking myths about creativity. So when we were looking at this, we were thinking about, again, those leaders who are trying to do this in their schools. And, you know, our experience has been when we've worked with teachers and worked with leaders on this in schools, and particularly with creativity, culture and education, as you'll hear later on all over the world. One of the biggest barriers for really widening this out throughout the school is this is the barrier about how do you have the confidence to bring people who are uncertain, skeptical on board. This is about looking at debunking the myths about creativity and really taking on the different roles of thinking about this as an advocate and also thinking about it as a skeptic. But before I just talk to you a bit more about that, I just want to also talk about the format of these activities, because what you'll see in front of you is the layout of each activity, which looks exactly the same. I talked earlier about how we were thinking throughout writing this book and talking about this book about how time is obviously precious. So for each activity, we were trying to make them around the hour mark, some of them like this one just over, so that a busy leader, again, could fit this into a twilight activity or on an inset day quite easily. And then, as Louise has mentioned, you've got the creative habits of mind, and then each activity goes straight into talking about the resources and setting up. So again, making it very, very clear, making it very easy, hopefully, for the busy leader to be able to get this set up and going straight away. And then the activities themselves, as you can see, are in 3 parts or different steps. So it is a step-by-step approach that takes the leader through these activities. And as I move on to this sheet, you can see on many of the activities, there's also resources that go with the activities too. Now in the playbook, these resources are in the back of the book, but there's also, and something that we felt really strongly about was there being a QR code to go alongside these activities and the resources, so that people can go online, get these resources, download them, photocopy them, and again, just to make it nice and straightforward for being able to facilitate these kind of activities. This is these kind of activities are our kind of bread and butter. This is what we do at Creativity, Culture and Education. But it was really interesting having to write these, some of these, from the perspective of a leader who may not have facilitated this kind of thing before, and being aware that this could be quite daunting for people. So we've tried to make this really, really straightforward and just encouraging and supportive all the way through. But just to finish off on this activity, so this is the resource that comes with it. As I say, it signposts the reader to a resource, and these are at the back of the book. It takes them through a role play scenario, And at the end of the activity, it's, as Louise mentioned, going back to those reflection questions. And you'll have seen in that activity sheet I showed you some space for some notes as well. Again, when we were talking about developing this playbook, we felt really strongly about there being space for people to write on the book, which I'm not sure about when I have a book, not being too precious about them, but really thinking about this book as a workbook. So whether that's post-it notes or actually writing in the margin, that's the sort of experience that we felt leaders would go through when they were using this book and interacting with it.
Fantastic, thank you both. And it's so clear, and picking up the comment in the chat there, it's so clear how thoughtful you've been in terms of making this really accessible. I think it's one of the biggest challenges as a practitioner in the system who wants to be engaged with the latest thinking and research. And sometimes it can feel like such a gulf when highly academic papers, however brilliant the insights are, they're just not accessible for people who are very time poor, although they may want to engage with the big ideas. So very clear how thoughtful on behalf of the profession. Thank you for making it very usable and accessible. And super interesting themes emerging for me then before we go on to the next bit, and interested in thoughts in the chat. I mean, things that were coming up for me there partly is around language. How rare is it to be in a conversation and on a call where we're hearing words like playfulness and experimentation, and trying things. And I'm kind of, I love the boldness of that language. And I think there's an interesting kind of conversation about the extent to which is that the same thing as trialing something or piloting something with different language, and what's the pros and cons of that, so interested thoughts in the chat about that, Clearly what the other theme that comes through for me is about risk. So playfulness and experimentation it sounds a bit more risky than a pilot. So that, to me, that's kind of, I'm interested in anyone's reflections on that. But I think for me, what stops things being risky or mitigates the risk is about the quality of the reflection and the evaluation of what you learn from what you do. And, clearly you've all spoken so eloquently about that aspect and how this playbook emphasizes that. And I think for me, that's a bit that closes the circle, but in such a, risk management is such a heavy part of what we are forced to think about as executive leaders in the system. So I think that's a really interesting kind of linguistic, is it linguistic, or how substantive is that? So I'll throw that out there into anyone's thoughts as we move on to the next section and anything in the chat. So Nia and Sian are going to come in now to give us a bit more context about the schools that you worked with. So you've worked with schools around the globe and specifically practice from the Welsh context. So lovely to hear a bit more about the practice that helped inform this work.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Liz. And this really just adds to Ellen, when Ellen talked earlier about the research. Our experience from creativity, culture and education is over a decade of experience working in partnership with organisations in diverse places around the world, such as Ireland, Norway, Pakistan, Thailand, Australia, Hungary, and home here in the UK too, and with Wales, which Sian will pick up on in a little bit. And our experience from working in all these diverse countries is being the same when it comes to leadership. Time and time again on the ground, we have seen that leadership can either be an enabler or blocker to creating change at both school and system level. Programs and sometimes even policies can be in place to encourage creative thinking. Those things can be there, but actually it needs that whole kind of ecosystem approach to make the greatest impact, and to be frank with you, to ensure equitability too, because otherwise we're just left with a few passionate teachers and leaders who are going to do this anyway because they've got that such firm belief in it. And to lead creative thinking, it's more than just giving permission. Often when we've worked with teachers, they're just waiting for that permission, but actually what we understand, it's more than that. So like Louise explained, this needs to be leaders modeling creative thinking, and fundamentally I think, to challenging their own philosophies and educational paradigm on which way they're coming into education, and whether things that are changing globally, you know, whether that's ecologically, politically, and everything else, whether then some of those philosophies and kind of thinking about education sometimes, well, does need to change. I remember just, you know, practically speaking about this, I remember a teacher we worked with once being very, very upset because she'd been told one day quite firmly from her teacher that she needed to embed creative learning and teaching in her classroom. And the very next day, the instruction was that there needed to be more evidence in books. And in her mind, those were two very different things. Now, I would argue they don't have to be, but in this case, the head teacher was trying to do the right thing, you know, was obviously interested in developing creative thinking in the classroom, but it comes back again to that kind of overall vision, how that's being communicated, what conditions in place for that vision, how that's being supported, and the leaders who do this really well are very, very secure every single time in their North Star and what their purpose is, and that clarity of vision, being able to communicate, coming back to that language issue again. So yeah, that's our experience, but I'll pass on to Sian, because I know they've had interesting experiences in Wales too.
Oh, diolch Nia, thank you very much, and hello everybody, it's lovely to see you this afternoon. Yes, just wanted to build on a little bit on what's been said already. I mean, Bill touched upon it right at the beginning about this just collaboration and how we all came together. It's been so lovely to reconnect, as it were, on this publication. I will talk a little bit about the work in Wales now, but just to say that all of the work we do in Wales is underpinned by the 5 creative habits that we've been talking about. Nia herself used to work on the programme in Wales as well, and CCE themselves were the organisation that way back in 2013 really helped us devise the programme that's now been running in Wales since 2015. So it's great that we've been able to join up those dots once again and come back all together and work on this publication. But just to talk a little bit about the work we do in Wales, we've been delivering a national programme in partnership with the Department for Education since 2015. It's called Creative Learning Through the Arts, but the programme solely focuses on developing creativity and creative approaches to teaching and learning across the curriculum, and it really does that by placing the arts at the heart of education. We've been running since 2015, initially for a 5-year programme, but we are still going in 2023, and we will remain until 2025 as well, which will see 10 years of us cultivating and nurturing creative thinking in our schools, which is quite unprecedented and something that we're very proud of. The programme that we work on here it's got kind of 3 overarching aims, which is about how to improve attainment through creativity, how to increase arts experiences and opportunities in schools, and what we can do to support those teachers and practitioners in developing their skills. Now, over the years, our evaluation has been showing us, and it kind of still continues to show us, that the positive impact that working in this way has on improving engagement, it improves attendance, attainment, but teachers, and in particular senior leaders, are also talking about the benefits in relation to curriculum development and school transformation. Now, if we want to reach our work and kind of, well, widen the reach of our work, I should say, and also meet the ambition of our new curriculum, which is now live in Wales, we know that targeting senior school leaders is paramount to the success of that. Wales and everywhere else needs inspirational leaders that are well prepared and supported to lead organisations through the changes ahead. So we've been fortunate enough in Wales to team up with the National Academy for Educational Leadership in Wales, and have been fortunate enough to get them to endorse a provision that we do that is all based on the work that we've been doing in Wales over the last 8 years, sorry. The Lead Creative School scheme that Bill talked about, absolutely, with those 5 creative habits of mind underpinning all of that. And we were asked by the National Academy to come up with a provision, a professional learning provision, targeted specifically at leaders that could really look at their own practice. They could think about how they want to develop their own practice and really initiate some change within their setting. So the program that we run here is very much, it's called the Creative Leadership Program. It's very much a mentoring program, but it's absolutely, it runs for about 12 weeks, give or take, depending on school circumstances. But it's very much a mentoring approach where they work with a creative agent, which is an artist within its own right, to really tackle some of those challenges that they might be facing within their school. Some of the things that we ask those leaders to consider when they're working on the Creative Leadership Programme, it's all about how we can encourage them to share process rather than product. It's all about how we can challenge them to explore assumptions and habits that act as a barrier to changing practice. Nia talked a little bit about those barriers just now. Looking at how to support staff in taking risks. We've heard this again, and it is about giving them that permission to have that space to really take those risks and think about their own professional learning through inquiry, and also assist them really to create a climate for innovation and professional learning across their school. So a lot of the activities that you'll see within the playbook are based on activities that has been happening in Wales over the last 8 years. And really, education is all about kind of helping people to find what they are passionate about and find what excites them and stimulates them. And I think somebody said in the chat earlier, you know, working in this way, sometimes it reminds teachers as to why they went into the profession in the first place. And that's something that we're definitely hearing here in Wales by working in this way. And creativity is contagious. And what we're trying to do throughout this playbook is just pass that message on, really. So yes, I think I'll just stop there if that's okay, Liz.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Sian. It's absolutely lovely. And I have to say, I look with great green-eyed envy over the border to the opportunities and the boldness that's happening to the west of the border, but also to the north of the border, where in Scotland there's lots of interesting things happening as well, aren't there, in terms of this work. And it does feel like we're in a bit of a cul-de-sac, that's a polite word, or a backwater in England. So all credit to you guys for leading the charge and empowering that. And I think that point about permission is so key. And that's why, from my perspective, leadership is so key to this. You know, you can get isolated bits of practice for individual practitioners doing things, but it will always be in spite of, unless the leaders are able to lead it, give permission, give space, and enable and facilitate, because just like anything else, there's a rigor and a discipline to these practices, and it's not just about giving space without the scaffolding, the facilitation, the reflection, all the things that you've been describing.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, we know from our experience in Wales, those schools where this can happen quite organically, it happens really effectively in those schools where there's the buy-in from the top, so the leaders are kind of on board right from the offset. So it just kind of highlights really the importance of our investment really in those leaders to help them along the way.
Fantastic, all credits, and can we all come and play, please? That isn't what I should be saying, is it? It's a recruitment crisis in England. We're going to come on to a bit now, thinking about, for each of you, kind of your highlights, your 30-second take to really highlight a key message. So I guess what we want to give to our audience here is, you know, your kind of nuggets, the key messages. Obviously, you've heard some of those already. But yeah, so the question we posed you before this was, if you had 30 seconds to highlight a key message or feature of the playbook, what would it be? So I'm going to start with Ellen, and then Louise and Nia, and we'll start there.
I would say that my key message is what's new and helpful about this playbook is that it recognises a comprehensive and evidence-informed set of 10 areas that leaders can influence to grow young people's creativity, and it provides activities to help leaders understand and bring about change in their own context, both for their learners and for themselves. I hope that was 30 seconds.
For me, I think there's probably, well, there's more than one. Other than reiterating that point about the people thinking about their own creative habits of mind and developing that as part of it, I think it links in with what you said, Liz, about the whole systemic approach. And for me, it's also how it connects with the kind of school that we hope that schools will be, and for me that school is a learning organisation, which is something that's been taken up in Wales, less so here. I think my third point is something that Nia's going to mention.
Thanks, Louise. And I think Karen's mentioned it in the comments too, and it's been mentioned a few times actually already today. One of my favourite features of the book is a particular activity, and it's a thread that goes through the playbook too, and that is about common language and what kind of language is helpful or unhelpful for developing and leading creative thinking. It really challenges, I think, the reader to consider what impactful leadership is and what kind of leadership we need more of moving forward, and perhaps what kind of different way of being, what kind of different way of talking, different ways of communicating we need to do that successfully. Not sure if Sian or Katy.
Brilliant.
I'm happy to go next. I'm not sure it'll take me 30 seconds. I tend to talk quite quickly, as you probably just gathered, but I think I would describe the playbook, and Nia, you used this word earlier as a, oh no, you used the word toolkit actually, so forgive me, but I would describe the playbook as a toolbox. I think a toolbox of ideas and approaches to explore and try on new ways of working. I think it's fair to say that we're all operating in challenging and predictable circumstances, and understand that innovative systems and creative thinking are essential to create a better future. So that was my...
Thanks, Sian. Brilliant. Do you want to tag Katy and then we'll come to Bill?
Thanks, Liz. My key message, and then the way I describe the playbook, as a supportive friend. It's aimed to be a supportive friend for leaders to work with, to come back to, that provides stimulus and strategies, to take a lens that's intentional to school development. So hopefully it's a useful tool that sits alongside leaders as a support.
Thanks, everyone. Impossible task, this, isn't it? I think we're at a tipping point, and this book is our friend. And it's a bit like going on a walk in the countryside or indeed city with a friend, and you're not looking at them, but you're talking and thinking and reflecting and challenging and engaging, and you're excited. And that's what this book is about. It's at least as much about the tone, as Louise was saying, equally the tone and the content. And I'd like to think that if we could all hold hands collectively and head in this direction, we're at that moment when it will no longer be acceptable not to have creativity as an explicit aim of our national, state, district, MAT, school curriculum. It's abhorrent to me that there is virtually no mention of creativity in the English national curriculum. As Liz said, look north, look west, look to Ireland, the island of Ireland, and look to Northern Ireland, and you can see a very different picture.
Can I just quickly add, I know we've got a couple of people here from the west coast of Canada, and British Columbia has it in their curriculum too.
They certainly do, and we cite and love the work of British Columbia and Alberta and Ontario, just to make 3 mentions of that wonderful place.
Brilliant. Big shout out there, some big smiles being received there, I think. So thank you.
Huge shout out to our friends in Canada who've got the competence-based idea, like Australia has, like most of the countries that are doing this, and unlike England. Sorry, I'll shut up.
No, we hear you, Bill. Absolutely. So I guess it's just reminding us, isn't it, in the English context, that we are in the minority of countries, of jurisdictions who are not engaging with this agenda, and it almost, this, I think this is part of making some of this stuff more talk aboutable, and it not being seen as something which is counter to a high standards agenda. This is absolutely about high standards, about a broader range of things, and about a critical range of skills and mindsets which are essential for our economy, let alone mental health and all the other benefits. So last little set piece, and then we've got some time for questions. So I know the playbook is just the sort of the start of it, and you've got greater ambitions around this work and how you want to develop that. So I think Katy and Sian are going to say a little bit about that.
Thanks, Liz. If I make a start, Sian, and you can pick up anything that I may have missed or you want to add. Is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, I know you'll do a great job, Katy, because you've led brilliantly on this, but yeah, if I can add anything, I will.
Thank you. I've just dropped a link to our website, Leading for Creative Thinking, in the chat, so you can take a look at that at your leisure. But we're really excited to be extending the work of the playbook with a brand new website, Leading for Creative Thinking, that's acting as a hub for educators, school and system leaders and teachers who value creative thinking as a core purpose of education, and hopefully a space for leaders to work together, to connect, to share, to feel empowered, enabled, and to embed creative thinking in their context, wherever that may be in the world. But we are starting with 2 versions of the website, which is an English version and a Welsh version, as our starting point. And we have an outline there for you to see at Leading for Creative Thinking, which will evolve and develop over the summer and from October onwards, where there will be very different stimulus through video, podcasts, case studies, downloadable material with more strategies, more activities and reflective questions to be used across school, to support a range of leaders in a range of positions and settings and contexts to develop creative thinking and learning for educators and their students. And this website is part of our partnership. It's led by CCE and in partnership with Arts Council Wales and the Centre for Real World Learning, which draws upon a wealth of experience, national and international experience, but it's also a place for educators who bring experience to share and learn together. The website will signpost to other current thinking and global research and evidence that supports leaders and with the evidence you need to be able to carry things out, and will be a place for professional learning and professional development events and opportunities as things evolve over time. But that's our website that builds on our book and will expand the opportunities for creative thinking and reflection, and to share your own experiences and other colleagues' experiences together. Sian, is there anything you would like to add that I may have missed there?
I don't think so, Katy. I think you've covered everything. It's just to say that, we're really excited to develop the website. It's at its very early stages at the moment, but we really will be working to make that the hub, as Katy said, for educators to really come together and share that space, learn from each other, share best practice, and hopefully build that sort of really strong kind of professional learning community around creative thinking. So sort of watch this space and do sign up to. I think Nia's actually going to come on to maybe signing up to the newsletter and things a bit later on, so I don't want to steal your thunder, Nia, or anything.
No, thanks, Sian. Yeah, the website is ready now to take anyone who wants to register for the newsletter. So please do, because we've got, as Katy said, big plans to develop it. And just one last thing from me is the usual push and a code for you in the chat box to say thank you for coming this afternoon.
Brilliant, thank you all. So so interesting how this book is, you're really trying to think about how you bring the practice together and bring the people together who are committed to this, and kind of reinforcing the point, particularly in the English context, that there are a few brave warriors who are kind of sticking with this agenda, but it is to say it's not very conducive is to put it mildly, I think. So how really acknowledging this as an intervention to bring together those people who are working in this way and thinking in this way, to strengthen that practice, strengthen the numbers and strengthen the resolve, and be part of making that change more broadly. So we've got a couple of minutes. I'm going to, in a moment, press send on a shameless plug, just from a big education point of view, that we run a programme, which is an absolute sort of bedfellow, that's probably a very un-PC phrase now, but a close collaborator of this work, which is focused on supporting leaders who want to be part of the change, called the Big Leadership Adventure, which, a bit like playfulness, there's not many things in the sector that have the word adventure in them either. So trying to signal that that's a different way of supporting leaders. So I'll put that in as well as my shameless plug for anyone you may know, or you may be interested in that in yourselves. And we're excited to think about how we can collaborate more with the team on this work specifically. So we've got a few minutes. We've had loads of comments in the chat. Has anybody got any specific questions? If you want to stick your... I just muted myself, which was not intentional. Any questions, reflections, thoughts from anybody you would like to share in the last couple of minutes before we wrap up? Look at that, stunned silence. I can't believe it. I bet if we were in a room, there would be an immense amount of bubbling conversation going on. I don't know whether Bill or
colleagues from the States on the call as well.
Yes, thanks. So shout out to Jane. Thank you, Jane, for saving my awkward facilitation moment there.
Yes, I don't have to speak if you'd rather hear from colleagues from the States. I was just going to very briefly reflect on the question that's come up in the chat about where the arts fit in relation to creativity and creative thinking. I've actually found it quite helpful not to articulate too much around the arts, and I work in the arts. I am an arts person, but I found it helpful when talking to teachers about creativity and creative thinking to talk about creativity and creative thinking beyond the arts, because I found teachers can respond, and obviously they haven't seen your playbook, but they can respond by saying, well, I can't do the arts, therefore I cannot lead creative thinking in my classroom. And I do agree with Bill that actually we need to fight the arts thing alongside advocating for creativity and creative thinking. Of course, the arts can stimulate creative thinking, but so can a lot of other methodologies and thought processes. And I don't know if you've learnt from your research that you've been doing together, whether it is your findings that the arts can make teachers feel less confident about leading creative practice. It's difficult to generalize, but
it's really difficult to generalize, but I'm so in tune with what you're saying, Jane, in so unsurprisingly, perhaps in so many different ways. I think it's a nice irony that the Welsh Arts Council and Arts Council England are both promoting creativity in schools, where they're trying to persuade us all, quite rightly, that creativity is ubiquitous and it exists in every subject of every aspect of life. But I think the way of holding out the hand of friendship is absolutely to remind people what the special affordances are of creativity in the design subjects here in England, especially under some attack, and especially in the middle of secondary.
Thank you, such a helpful point. I'm conscious we're pretty much at the last minute. Bill, I did wonder if you wanted, there was a question in the chat about what are the implications for assessments, which is a big old topic. We want to just say a couple of points on that.
Absolutely. I started and then I pressed the send button. I'm not even sure I'd quite finished the very long and tedious answer in the chat, but I think we've been down in the weeds in assessment and frittering around working out whether we're teaching a 2-marker, a 4-marker, an 8-marker, and we've completely forgotten what the point of education or point of school or point of the whole course is. And I think we need to come right up into the sunlight and look down on a life spent in formal and informal education, and a long life, 100-year life potentially if you're born now, as Linda Grattan and colleagues have made us aware. And we need to think about all the strengths that we want this system to be able to honour. And so we need to start from generating a strength-based assessment system, as you might say, as we might say, Liz, head, hand, heart, all together. And it's a much more holistic view. It's what David Perkins calls playing the whole game of learning. And part of that whole game are what we call the 3 Cs at Rethinking Assessment. We're trying to reduce the number of others. Many of the OECD, World Economic Forum, Centre for Curriculum Redesign have 4 Cs, and we're crunching up creative thinking and critical thinking together into creative thinking, just as PISA has done. So you've got, on the one hand, the 3 Rs, on the other hand, the 3 Cs. And what we need to do is use things like a digital profile, like digital credentialing, like all the things that we used to value, the ability to moderate and look at work. Now, creativity is tricky because sometimes we have the product and sometimes we have the process, and sometimes the process is invisible. At Rethinking Assessment, we've just completed a pilot intervention study, and we found that even in the English curriculum, busy teachers can do this. They can embed it in subjects, they can track progression, and they can use assessment methods that they have never been taught how to use before. And we're going to bring all of that together, and there's a report with our colleagues in the Australian Council for Educational Research, who've been our research partner on this, and we'll be launching that in the new year. I can't really take any more time, Liz, but can I please suggest that anybody interested goes to the Rethinking Assessment site, which is very much part of the big education family.
Great, I've just put that link in the chat there, Bill, as well. So thank you very much indeed. Great. Okay, I think we're pretty much at time. So it would just remain for me to thank our esteemed authors for this evening, and you all for joining us. It's been, and you could feel the excitement coming through even on a very hot Tuesday afternoon. So I hope I don't know whether we just post in again the discount code, Nia, just if you've got that easy to press send again. So we hope you will buy your copy or buy a set of copies for you and your colleagues, and really look forward to connecting with you again in the future. And huge thanks and congratulations again to our authors for such an important and inspiring piece of work. So have a great afternoon, everybody, and up the creativity revolution.